Peace and welcome to the culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of the conversation, folks. We got a dynamic show for you planned for you today. First and foremost, we're going to talk about how Speaker Mike Johnson has decided to blur the faces of some January 6 rioters to avoid charges being placed against them. He said this out in public. His people said, that's not quite exactly what the speaker meant. We will talk a little bit about it. Also, let's talk about how federal law enforcement agencies have been defying presidents and Congress for years in terms of keeping shootings a secret. We'll talk to you about the little dirty secret behind some of the top law enforcement institutions of our country. Also, can we talk about how Black attorney generals are struggling with trying to bring justice within the justice system, especially for Black people? We'll be checking in with our sister Suzette Speaks to get her take on what the uphill battle that attorney generals are facing all across the country. And again, folks, the Texas high school student is suspended for his locks. Again, this story is getting crazier and crazier every time we bring it to you. So I want to get your take. Stay with us. It's all happening on today's edition of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. Let's go. All right, folks, welcome to the culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in and, of course, being a part of the conversation as we are streaming on a bunch of dope platforms. We are streaming live on our home platform of blackstarnetwork.com. Make sure you go to our website, download the app for free. Follow us on social media under Black Star Network. And, of course, give a little something to put in the pot as we talk about carving a space out in this digital media such as ours. So again, blackstarnetwork.com. We're also streaming live on Amazon News on your Amazon Fire TV. Make sure you check us out there. We're also on Amazon Prime Video, where you can see us under live TV and news on the Prime Video app, or you can find us on Amazon.com under Prime Video, live TV, then news. And we also are streaming on Freevee, folks. Find us under On Now, on News, on Freevee. And we're on Plex TV, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And you can search for Black Star Network on Plex TV and find us under Live TV, the News and Opinion. All right, folks, let's check in with you, our online culture crew, as we have these conversations today. I'm very excited. Big shout out to the online culture crew that is doing some fantastic things. And most importantly, y'all are tuned in to what we have to say today, and I cannot thank you enough. So I see you, Pauline. Thank you so much for checking in. My sister Pauline Hurt checking in from Cleveland. Big brother Willie Frazier, great afternoon to you, big brother Willie. Thank you for again checking in, and I can't wait to hear what you got to say. My sister Janelle, thank you so much. I can't wait to hear what you got to say as well. Hey, Culture Crew. Hey, Deidre Hall. Thank you once again. Conscious Thought, good afternoon, brother. Good afternoon. Good to see you. My pastor, Pastor Damon Blissett. Hey, kings and queens. Pastor Damon, once again, the block church is in full effect here in the chat. There it is. You don't like my music? Peace from the East. That's right. Checking you out and you don't like my music. Thank you, sir. Who else we got in here? Frankie, Southeast DC, checking in. Frankie, I hear that. Southeast DC. Okay. Historic Black community. H. Renee Nelson, thank you so much for checking in. Truly appreciate this. Cindy D, I see you. Hello, Cindy. Good to connect with you once again. Ming Lee, Natasha Surge, love to connect with you. And good to connect with you again. My man, Real Brooklyn. Hey. Real Brooklyn. Hey. Thank you, sir, for being with us once again. Yeah. Yeah, a little New York there. All right, folks. Look, my head just dropping all over the place. All right, folks, let's talk about it. Let me bring my sister in. She is the host of the Suzette Speaks Show on YouTube. She is also an esteemed attorney down in the state of Florida, and she is a political strategist. We want to welcome back to the airways Suzette Speaks.
Hey, y'all. What's up, Culture Crew? Happy Wednesday.
Woo! Happy Wednesday. Happy Wednesday. Suzette, how you feeling this afternoon? You all good?
Fantastic. We got a little cold streak here in Miami. I woke up to 50 some degrees. I was like, okay, winter is coming. So,
Wow.
well,
Wow.
we gonna
No,
bring the
I
heat
feel you.
here. So,
No, I feel you though. I definitely feel you. All right, we're gonna get it hot today, Suzette, because we got a lot of dope topics. First and foremost, let's talk about your favorite guy, Speaker Mike Johnson. Speaker Johnson, who has been a true advocate of the big lie. He has been one of the ones that has been instrumental in trying to overturn the 2020 election on behalf of former President Donald Trump. And now he has, of course, been voted as Speaker of the House. But he has shown his stripes more in more ways than one. He's decided to move forward on a controversial move to protect those who stormed the Capitol on January the 6th. He has gone as far as to say, quote, and this is from NBC News. Take a look at this, folks. We have to blur some faces of persons who participated in the events of that day, talking about January 6th, because we don't want them to be retaliated against and to be charged by the DOJ. He said this yesterday. The speaker said he is releasing the footage to counter the January 6th committee's presentation of the riot. He said, we want the American people to draw their own conclusions. I don't think partisan elected officials in Washington should present a narrative and expect that it should be seen as the ultimate truth. What kind of Black Mirror alternate reality stuff is this, Suzette?
I know.
Blurring the faces of the rioters on January 6th so we can find the truth and people can kind of come to their own conclusions as to what happened that day?
that is a shocking statement made by the person who now serves as Speaker of the House and third in line to the president. This is Mike Johnson. You guys, we met him just a few weeks ago when he was a dark horse candidate who came out on top to be elected as the Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives. But Mike Johnson's past was far more checkered than many people had understood at the time. At the time of the 2020 election, when we had the big lie, again, Donald Trump did not win the election. Joe Biden did. Mike Johnson at that time was the vice chair of the GOP caucus. And as his role required, he promoted the big lie, and he was one of 100 Republicans who signed an amicus brief of a lawsuit that was filed by Attorney General Ken Paxton out of Texas. Ken Paxton sued to overturn the election. In his lawsuit, he claimed that in 4 states, former President Trump had actually won when he did not. And he has been an advocate of the big lie in so many ways that this is just a continuation of what we have seen as his stance in support of what was an attempt to overthrow our government, overthrow our free and fair elections. And now he's taken this quite peculiar stance of saying that the videos that exist, of course, there are thousands of hours, Farajii, of video of what happened on the Capitol that day, January 6th, where it showed those rioters, those people who stormed, as they called it, the Capitol, in order to stop the free and fair transfer of the United States government, of our election results. And he now is protecting, as he put it in his press conference, but his office later clarified, to protect these folks from all possible attacks. But again, what does that mean really when we're thinking about what the American people deserve to know and deserve to see? Again, these folks were a part of a public rally, right? They were in a march towards the Capitol, egged on by former President Trump. And now he's saying that all those videos of inside the Capitol, all of the hallways, there are, again, thousands of hours of videos that were collected on that day. He's not going to show the faces of folks who were there. So we have a lot of people who are up in arms about why he's doing this and if he should be doing this. But currently, as of this broadcast, that's what's going to happen.
So Tiana checked in, one of our great culture crew members, and good afternoon, Tiana. You brought up a point, and I want us to I'm gonna pose this question to you, Suzette. Then we gotta take a quick pause. But wouldn't this be obstruction of justice? I want us to think about that, because if you are openly saying, I don't want to identify individuals who broke the law, that means that you are, quote unquote, protecting them. Wouldn't that be a form of obstruction of justice? I want you to think of, I know you already got the answer, but we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, let's continue the conversation as we talk about Speaker Mike Johnson has decided to blur the faces of rioters who stormed the Capitol on January the 6th. Folks, I want to get your take on this. What do you make of this? Post your comments in the chat as we're streaming on Rolling Martin's YouTube page. And of course, stay tuned. We still got a lot to cover in the first half of the culture right here on the Black Star Network.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
I'm Farajii Muhammad, live from LA. And this is The Culture. The Culture is a two-way conversation. You and me. We talk about the stories, politics, the good, the bad, and the downright ugly. So join our community every day at 3 p.m. Eastern and let your voice be heard. Hey, we're all in this together. So let's talk about it and see what kind of trouble we can get into. It's The Culture, weekdays at 3, only on the Black Star Network.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
All right, folks, welcome back to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad, checking in with my sister, Suzette Speaks, host of the Suzette Speaks on YouTube. Make sure y'all follow her on social media, and she is one of our great legal minds and experts here on the show to give us some insights about some of the big conversations that are happening around the country. We're talking about Speaker Mike Johnson, who has made it public that he would go as far as to blur the faces of those rioters on January the 6th to prevent them from actually being charged by the DOJ, the Department of Justice. And so the chat is kind of blowing up right now, Suzette, because folks, Tiana kicked it off and saying, this is an obstruction of justice. Isn't that exactly what this is?
I would have to disagree at the moment because I was trying to do some research in time for our broadcast today, Farajii, and I would probably more accurately say I am not 100% sure. We know that there are 40,000 hours of tapes of the Capitol during the January 6th attack that exists. I was looking back to what we know happened so far with those tapes was that during the previous Speaker's administration, Kevin McCarthy, if we remember, back in February of 2023, he decided to release it only to, or some hours of it, several hours of it, only to Fox News's Tucker Carlson. At that time, when that decision came about, there was critical backlash, not only from Democrats and also other House Republican members, GOP members, saying like, why are you only allowing this to go out to one network? Later on in March of 2023, he announced that he would slowly roll out more of the tapes to other networks, et cetera, et cetera. Here we are now. The new speaker has made the statement. And again, if we could put that quote up, I just want to kind of emphasize what he exactly said, and then his office made a statement after the press conference and rolled it back. His quote, if I may, was that he wanted to prevent, and I want to say it exactly, speaking at the press conference, Johnson said, we have to blur some of the faces of persons who participated in the events of that day because we don't want them to be retaliated against and to be charged by the DOJ. Now, I understand why. I'm seeing the chat. I'm glad everybody's in it popping off that this could be challenged, but I don't know the mechanism as of yet because I was trying to figure out who controls these tapes. Is it the House Speaker's ultimate purview to say what happens to the Capitol tapes? I don't know the answer to that question. However, I think there can be some sort of filing by House Democrats that could try to augment the types of tapes that are released, as well as the challenge towards not blurring the faces. I don't know if there could be also a lawsuit possibly filed and whether there would be accurate grounds. But I don't know. The bottom line is who controls the tapes and who can say what exactly happens to the tapes. Just looking over the last 8 months as to what has happened to the tapes, it seems as if the Speaker of the House does have the final say as to who gets what. But the blurring issue, I think, is going to be something that does not go to sleep quietly. I do think there will be many challenges to it. And I don't know if he has actually the authority to make that decision and whether or not there are like a public records guideline as to what the public is entitled to. I know state by state, we have that in Florida. Of course, you have sunshine laws, what we call them here, where you have to be able to see what a public official has in their possession in the course of public business. But I'm not sure about the House of Representatives rules and whether this a speaker has the ultimate say so and can do this ultimately.
It seems absolutely suspect and suspicious that this would come out of the mouth of a person who is overseeing a part of Congress. This January 6th thing, when you look at it, when y'all remember how some Republicans even went as far to say that what you saw on January 6th was not a storming of the Capitol, but they used this word, Suzette, normal tourist visits.
That's what we heard from Tucker Carlson when he received the tapes first. Again, I was like, how can a speaker be so partial as to only send it to Fox News at the time, Tucker Carlson, who has since been let go. But now we are seeing another move towards, again, what is to me outright support of the folks who committed this act of terror against our government. We know now that the behaviors that we saw were not, in fact, walks in the park, as Tucker Carlson called them. People, I think he said it was like peaceful chaos was a quote he used when he looked at these tapes and was slowly letting them into the public sphere through his position at Fox News, but not anymore. So here we are. Everybody wants the tapes. They're trying to me, split hairs. Allow us to see it without allowing us to see it. And it's terrible. Again, it is impeding, and I agree with the sentiment in the chat, the position that the people should have all information. Now, because it's blurred to the public, doesn't mean that, again, investigators haven't had a chance to comb through this. But of course, we know on the internet, we have sleuths and people who are very good at, facial recognition technology, et cetera, that could help in the efforts to bring people to justice. But yeah, this is really quite an incriminating in terms of how our House Speaker believes he can justifiably protect, quote unquote, those who, again, we know stood on the wrong side of justice. But again, his track record since that election in 2020 has been to pull stunts, to file frivolous lawsuits, to support them, to vote against the certification of elections. He's done all this. So his behavior is quite in line with his politics, but it's very dangerous that the person, again, that is third in line, if something happens to the president, he goes to the VP, and if it happens to the VP, if something happens to the VP, the third person to take over the reins of our government is standing on the side of folks who try to overthrow, that very institution. So it is quite damaging to his credibility that he is being fair, and he
doesn't care
that he should be the defender of democracy that we need our Speaker of the House to be.
He doesn't care about his credibility. He doesn't care about his credibility. He doesn't care about how this is going to look, or more important, I mean, he's the guy that was on board with the idea of the 2020 election being a fraud. So he doesn't care, I don't think, in the same way that you and I care about this, and more importantly, the implications of this. Very quickly, before we take our next pause, let me get a couple of comments in from the crew. Real Brooklyn, you said this is what you call alternative truths. It's a common practice from politicians who love to manipulate or change things in favor of their progress. Absolutely.
And I mean, in the press conference, he was saying people should get information on the internet about January 6th for themselves. I'm like, what are you saying? You should be the ultimate authority because A, you were there, and B, you have the facts, you have the actual tapes and the evidence as to what took place. And he wants to, instead of bringing the truth transparently to the American people, he wants to cover up what happened. That's what, in essence, what this does. So again, this is very worrisome. As to this is again the highest ranking individual in the House is saying to us, U.S. people, American people, you cannot handle this truth. We're going to protect those. He initially said from DOJ charges, but then he rolled back and his office came out with a statement that said, okay, we're going to protect them from being attacked by anybody. That's why we have to do it. Any retaliation at all. But specifically, he meant what he said initially. In that first statement, a lot of people would argue that's his real sentiment, that he doesn't want these fellow, as he may call them, patriots, to charge. Right. Really what he's doing.
Let me get one more in very quickly. Janelle, my sister, you said Johnson said that he wants to blur some faces to offer a warped version of due process. But what about the faces of those traumatized protecting democracy?
Very good point.
Again, that is, and I think you make an excellent point, Janelle, Suzette, but that's if your moral meter is on the right place, right? Like your sense of morality, our sense of what democracy looks like is different from what House Speaker Mike Johnson's sense of morality and what democracy looks like. So I'm just going to accept that for what it is. That guess what? You're not working from the same playing field. You're not working from the same page. We're not in the same book. Hell, we're not even in the same library at this point, because your view of what is going on with our government, how do you came up in there to be a disruptor. So you're now Speaker of the House. Well, just before, like a year ago, 2 years ago, you talking about the government is the election is a fraud. Make it make sense.
An election denier, absolutely.
All right, look, we got to take a quick pause. Look, speaking of DOJ, let's talk a little bit about the situation, how now there's a report that says that federal law enforcement agencies have been defying presidents and Congress for years about their tactics and the number of shootings that they actually commit under their jurisdiction. I'm going to share with you some of the latest about this and why this can be super problematic, especially for Black folks in this country. Stay with us. It's The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
I'm Farajii Muhammad, live from LA. And this is The Culture. The Culture is a two-way conversation. You and me. We talk about the stories, politics, the good, the bad, and the downright ugly. So join our community every day at 3 p.m. Eastern and let your voice be heard. Hey, we're all in this together. So let's talk about it and see what kind of trouble we can get into. It's The Culture, weekdays at 3, only on the Black Star Network.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
All right, folks, welcome back to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of the conversation. I'm joined by my sister, Suzette Speaks, and we talk a little bit of law enforcement. We talked a little politics. Let's talk law enforcement, because I think this is, when I read this report and, sharing it with you, Suzette, I was like, oh my God, this is a hot topic. This is going to be a very serious problem. True, I want y'all to listen to me real close now. Take a look. Federal law enforcement agencies, your top law enforcement agencies in the country, the FBI, the DEA, the ATF, all of the alphabet boys, as they're called, right? These top agencies have been defying presidents and Congress for years when it comes to certain tactics and the shootings that they commit against the American people without no sense of accountability. Here's the latest from NBC News. Take a look at this first. Let's put up the first quote, please. Congress and a string of presidents for nearly 30 years have been pushing federal law enforcement to reform and become more transparent. But those four agencies overseen by the Department of Justice, among the most prestigious in the country, have been slow to adopt reforms long embraced by big city police departments, such as the use of body cameras and the release of comprehensive use of force data. Examinations of the incidents revealed that the Justice Department's law enforcement agencies continue to use tactics that many big city police departments now shun. They have fired at moving cars and shot people within seconds of encounters without taking steps to de-escalate the situation. We're talking about the ATF, we're talking about the DEA, that's the Drug Enforcement Agency, the FBI, and U.S. Marshals. These are the four institutions that are on the hot seat right now, Suzette. Basically, they have kept their shootings in secrecy, but more importantly, the tactics which they use, as I just laid out there from this report, The tactics that we have been saying that police departments in big cities, Miami, Los Angeles, Baltimore, and other places that have been deemed to be unconstitutional, have been deemed as being another form of police brutality. These are the very tactics that these four government agencies use without no accountability, without no transparency, and essentially they are can do whatever they want because there's no real oversight. President Biden and many other presidents have tried to bring some level of oversight, but these institutions, as it's been reported, are slow to adopt new reforms.
Yeah, looking at this problem, let's first describe how many people and how big of a problem we're talking about, Farajii. When we talk about the federal government oversees federal law enforcement agencies, right? What happens on the local level is overseen by local authorities, right? Your state prosecutors within your state. But of course, these are agencies of the United States government. Again, we're talking about the ATF, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives. We're talking about DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration, as well as the U.S. Marshals and FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation. So how many people are we talking about? Those agencies alone possess about 24,000 law enforcement officers nationwide. When you also add in the amount of folks and local task forces that are included in different investigations that are going on, ongoing criminal related law enforcement duties, we're looking at about 40,000 people actively cooperating with or working directly for any of these agencies at a given day, right? So that's a lot of people. When we're looking at the amount of deaths, we're talking about at the hands of federal law enforcement agencies between 2018 and 2022, over 200 people, I think it was 213 folks were killed by a federal officer, as you described in a multitude of ways. But let's look at again what they are doing during the arrests, right? So about 14% of the people that were shot at were low-level criminals or charged with low-level crimes, right? People who were not in any kind of major criminal jeopardy. But about 44% of those folks are what would be considered very high-level which I say criminal activity involved folks. So people who are a danger or would pose a danger to a possible arresting officer. Many times these shootings occur when there is a search warrant being administered, when there is an arrest to be made, and other forms of investigative tools are being administered. We oftentimes see the interactions like what we've just described happen. So what are we doing about it? Now, I'm trying to figure out what is the solution here, because I'm like, is Congress afraid of its own agencies? Is the administration, because these are part of the federal response, which is falling underneath the president, right? Given authority by acts of Congress, by the laws created by Congress. Why isn't anybody investigating this any further? Well, we know that, Farajii, even when it comes to a national database of shootings that would include local law enforcement too, there is none. There has been kind of a wall of defiance, as you described, that has kept the public from knowing exactly who shot who and why. So we have this lack of accountability, as you've accurately pointed out, when it comes to if you are a federal law enforcement officer, you're not held to the same standard as perhaps someone who works in a local agency who can be held accountable or who is properly investigated when there is a shooting. So we have a huge issue here, just to describe the problem for what for folks who may not know how many people we're talking about and what can be done. But I think solution wise, I'm thinking we need congressional hearings with the who are in charge of these agencies. Somebody has to be held accountable, right? Somebody needs to be placed on the hot seat to be available to answer questions as to why, when we are asking you, and again, I don't know how strict, obviously, the enforcement is, because if there's a law on the books that says that they must report, which I doubt there is, I hadn't had time to research in time for this broadcast, but the way in that they're moving so lackadaisically, it's like they kind of already know that either there is an understanding between the administration and the congressional oversight that should be there, that it won't be exercised for whatever reason. But it's quite dangerous because then we have a layer of law enforcement that, again, is supposed to work on behalf of the people of the United States of America that will go without accountability when they shoot people, which is very, very, very dangerous.
Absolutely, absolutely, very dangerous. And I think the other dangerous element to this whole scenario, Suzette, is the fact that nothing is really being done. I'm talking about, and I'm sure there have been attempts before. President Biden, as I mentioned, has been trying to bring some reform, but there hasn't been no real consequences against these agencies, right? And what? Guess what's happening? More money is still poured into these agencies. A lot of national, federal money is still poured into these agencies. Uh, but there are people's lives that have been destroyed when they can't say. It's one thing to say something against your police, your local police force, but try to go up against a federal agency that for busting into your home, grabbing stuff, tearing stuff apart, throwing people on the ground, arresting you, only to find out they might say something like, "Oh, this is the wrong house, or this is the wrong situation."
Yeah, and
And
notice
then,
that. Yeah.
and no justice is coming from that. You don't feel like there's no recourse or any type of consequences to those actions.
Absolutely. It has to be
And
either congressional reform or through, again, the executive branch. Because I'm thinking about it again, when we look at the federal prosecution and the administration of justice on the federal level, you don't see federal officers, having to do the sneak attack. I mean, they do in certain instances, obviously, do go in undetected, etc. But oftentimes you
right,
see them knock directly on your door because they know if 99% of the cases are going to be convictions, they're not worried about, certain types of interactions. They'll let you know, they'll give you warning. But oftentimes, in these instances, I think 213 cases that have happened over about 4 years. The recent study, I think 2018 to 2024, 2018 to 2022. Those are the exceptions. They will probably say, just looking at the other side of the coin, not saying I agree with it, but I'm trying to think from their point of view, they're going to make an argument that, what was done was justifiable. Again, shooting at moving cars has been something that has been very frowned upon when it comes to state and local law enforcement. But again, the
absolutely,
feds have a very different, I want to say, bar for their behavior because, again, there's no one seemingly with the authority, with the teeth to say we're going to investigate each and every one of these shootings. I think there is, again, factors that maybe we don't understand in the public that go into why the law enforcement community at that level may
hmm
have implicit privilege that we are not understanding as the public, because we would want to know what happened and why and have a thorough investigation, but it's very troubling. And so we hope that members of Congress are brave enough, or the administration is going to be tougher on making sure that the information that has already been requested is given to the proper authorities for oversight. But again, this is a very interesting tango that's happening based on the information that is not
yeah,
available as of right now.
absolutely. Look, we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, let's have more conversations about this. Plus, as we talk about bringing folks to justice, let's talk about how Black attorney generals around the country are grappling with trying to bring some sense of justice to Black and marginalized communities. And we'll tell you a little bit about that struggle. And I want to get, of course, my take from my sister, Suzette, to talk about how prosecutors are trying to do their part to make the criminal justice system a little bit better and more equitable, especially when it comes to Black folks coming into the system. So we'll have that conversation and a whole lot more on the other side. Folks, stay with us. You're tuned into The Culture right here on the Black Star Network.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
I'm Farajii Muhammad, live from LA. And this is The Culture. The Culture is a two-way conversation. You and me. We talk about the stories, politics, the good, the bad, and the downright ugly. So join our community every day at 3 p.m. Eastern and let your voice be heard. Hey, we're all in this together. So let's talk about it and see what kind of trouble we can get into. It's The Culture, weekdays at 3, only on the Black Star Network.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com. Folks, Black Star Network is here.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
All right, folks, welcome back to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of the conversation as we're streaming live on a bunch of different platforms. First and foremost, our home platform of blackstarnetwork.com. Make sure you go to our website today, download the app on all of your devices, follow us on social media under Black Star Network. And most importantly, we ask that you give something to help us power us in this digital movement. Your donations make a world of difference, no matter how big, no matter how small, but your investment says a lot to us, saying that we're on the right track. Your investment also shows us that, guess what, that we are doing what we're supposed to be doing. And most importantly, you are part of this process. So go to our website today at Black Star Network and support us today. Also, we're streaming live on Amazon News or your Fire TV, where you can find us there. We're also streaming live on Amazon Prime Video, where you can find us on Prime Video app under Live TV and News. So find us at Amazon.com under Prime Video, Live TV, the News. Freevee, you can find us there on the Freevee network on Now under News. And you can find us on the Plex TV, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. All you have to do is search for Black Star Network or find us under Live TV and then go to News and Opinion. We've been talking about this as we get back into the conversation, talking about how there are some federal law enforcement agencies that have been keeping certain things enshrouded in secrecy, things like shootings, tactics, and other ways that these agencies are engaging with the public without much federal oversight. Even though there has been some calls by former presidents, by President Biden and other past presidents, and even some Congress members, this doesn't seem to be pushing the needle enough. So you have certain agencies like the ATF, DEA, U.S. Marshals. They're working in a sense in a cloud of mystery, and there isn't much accountability to the work that they're doing. And so I'm going to bring my sister Suzette Speaks, host of the Suzette Speaks show on YouTube, and she is one of our great legal minds here on the culture, and she is an attorney down in the state of Florida. I think that the hard part about this, Suzette, for me, is the simple fact that as much as we're talking about police reform, it seems like that part of the conversation goes completely over the heads of those who are running these agencies, these four federal agencies, right? So we could talk about police reform in Ferguson or Baltimore, talk about police reform in New York or Los Angeles or Miami, but it seems like the big city police departments are more progressive, are moving a little bit further along than the federal, whereas it should be, I think, opposite. The federal should be leading the charge. The federal should be leading the way, but that's not the case. Here's what came out of the NBC News report that we have been referencing here, Suzette, and it's just simply mind blowing that we find our federal law enforcement agencies to be in a space where they're using tactics like, for example, they use the tactics of the putting the arm around someone's neck. They actually still are allowed to do that. Federal agents, excuse me, can still use that particular tactic, even though it's frowned upon by smaller police departments. But I want to share with folks this quote from NBC News. Take a look at this. Let's put a quote too, please, Lise. It says, although the Justice Department has forced local law enforcement like the Baltimore and Los Angeles police departments to reform, its own agencies are legally exempt from similar oversight. The use of force data the Justice Department agencies publish is so limited that it is hard to determine who was shot, why, when, and by whom. Now, I want to take this even a step further. I've been watching this Netflix documentary called Victim Suspect, and it's about women who have been sexually assaulted, who go to the police, and essentially they want to tell their story. But the police officers in counties across this country have turned the victim into the suspect and even has gone as far as to arrest the victims of rape and sexual assault for filing false police reports and essentially making up stories, even though this is not the case. This is that the victims are actually victims. These aren't women who are making these stories up. But the police officers in these cases have mishandled the situation so bad that it has turned the victims into suspects. Now, here's one of the things that I've learned from this documentary. They had one officer who talked about a tactic called a ruse, R-U-S-E, ruse. And when he was on the stand and a lawyer asked him, sir, can you explain what the ruse is? He said, a ruse is when we tell the victim or the person that's filing the report that a lie, where we tell them a lie so that way we can get a confession of truth from that victim. So, for example, in sexual assault cases, they often say, police will say, well, we got video footage that shows otherwise of what you're saying, even though they may not have actual video footage. And the journalist that was highlighted in this particular documentary made the point that police can lie. They can lie in order to do their jobs. It's one of the few jobs that they can lie and not be held accountable for their lie. And now we're seeing this type of situation. It's like the police and these agencies can do whatever. They can lie to people. They can shoot people with no accountability. And guess what? We as the constituents have to take that.
There's so much case law here, Farajii, that you have touched upon that, in fact, does give law enforcement officers by law the ability to use non-factual information to try to elicit a confession or response. And again, regular, everyday, average Joes and Janes, everyday lay people don't really understand this. And I think this is going into more of a 101 on how our criminal justice system is flawed. So when I tell people, and I'm not giving legal advice here, again, I work only in Florida, but just as a general concept, what you're saying has been upheld in the court of law, that there are provisions that allow, folks to be, detained and questioned. That's why you have to listen for Miranda rights. That's why you have to get a lawyer and don't give statements even initially without an attorney, because just because the police are nice to you does not mean they're not using non-factual information to try to get you to admit to things, right? So this is a part of our system, whether we like it or not, that is been protected. And it's for the average person that maybe has not had any contact with law enforcement, it might be shocking. I've had clients myself that I'm thinking about specifically who, police knock, knock, knock. They thought they were just going to explain what happened. Everything would be cool. And I'm like, oh my goodness, you can't give initial statements that won't oftentimes come back to haunt you. And again, just because the officers seem nice and seem friendly and open to you and to getting to the bottom of what happens, that's not always the case. And I've seen
that's the problem.
In real life.
I'm sorry, I gotta say this because I've had some run-ins, and thank God that it didn't lead to nothing more serious. But that's part of the problem. If the officer, and I'm saying it's a federal law, if you're thinking federal, you're not thinking like some small time back alley type of officer. You're thinking if somebody's coming to your door, ATF, DEA, somebody's coming to you and they're like, look, all I need is some basic information. And you're like, oh, I'm willing to help. You know what I'm saying? Especially like you said, if the officer presents him or herself in a very like non-casual, okay, so what happened? This happened, boom, boom, boom. Okay, the game changes, the conversation changes once you say what happened, and then they're like, okay, let's take you down to the station. We need to take you in for some further questions. For what? What did I do? We think that this that there's some more details that we'd like to explain to you, and we need to get some clarity about. Like nobody has a lawyer on hand.
You better call one. You better call one because again,
like, hold on, Mr. DEA agent. Let me get my lawyer on the phone. Hey, Suzette, can you talk to this agent?
Listen, Farajii, again, this is non-legal advice. This is informational purposes.
Non-legal advice.
This is only because we're getting into the weeds here. But yeah, oftentimes, and I can speak as to, local law enforcement, oftentimes they are pursuing a theory for how they think, a situation transpired. So we are looking at oftentimes the public's idea is that law enforcement wants to get down to the truth. And oftentimes that is the case. But when there is pressure, depending on the culture of that specific agency, depending on, what that prosecutorial staff that they work alongside is like, and trying to, find who is accountable in a very zealous way can oftentimes lead to behaviors that is not necessarily lending themselves to getting to what is actually truthful as to what happened. They're looking oftentimes for folks for whom they can, tie to, a certain situation. So it is a very peculiar understanding of the law in the general sense that people don't understand that, oh, isn't that entrapment? No, it's not. There are certain versions of this, again, context matters, that can be entrapment, of course, but people would think, well, if an officer says, non-factual information in order to get me to say something, that can't be legal. It is. So in many cases, and again, it's a case by case and it's a context by context basis, but as a general practice, you have to be aware of this. And again, to bring it back to this story, when it comes to what is happening at our federal levels, again, we are not necessarily the end all be all through our elected officials in Congress and through our president. It sounds like to me, which again, somebody at some point, I don't know if no one wants to push against their own agencies, but there seems to be like a tension as to why there are folks who are able to, maintain their jobs when there are victims of, shootings out there. People's families, as you stated earlier, who are impacted by this don't really get that adequate justice, day in court, accountability, whatever you would like to term it, when it comes to a federal law enforcement officer. So I think oftentimes we just look at the politics behind it. Whether you're a Democrat, whether you're a Republican, oftentimes politicians do not want to be on the bad side of law enforcement. They want to be seen as tough on crime. No one wants to be seen as not supporting, their public servants. So I think there is a tension between that point of view where, yes, we want and respect those who would give their lives, right, to serve the public and who get up every day trying to make sure they are, protecting and serving. But when there are rogue elements, we have to also have adequate oversight and mechanisms when there are people who, unfortunately, don't uphold the same principles when they are wearing that badge. And there are going to be rogue elements in any job. I have a brother here on YouTube, Officer Nathan Daly, that talks about people want our law enforcement officers to have the highest standard. When you look at the lower, depending on where they're hired, standards of entry, sometimes it would shock people that all you have to have is, some basic training, and then you were given a gun and a badge. So we're not necessarily, as the public, oftentimes in line with the lack of adequate, what could I call it? The point of entry into some of these careers doesn't necessarily match what I think the public would want. And again, we need police officers who are willing to, make that ultimate sacrifice, who don't know what's on that other side of the door, don't know what's on the other side of, in that car, et cetera, et cetera. They just want to get home to their families as well. However, I think there's there's a lack of, when we talk about the standard we want our officers to keep, and federal is different because federal has a higher standard. In order to get in the FBI, in order to get in some of these agencies, you have to have, they go through rigorous testing and training. But oftentimes on the local level, you may not see that, and people need more officers. There's a bigger need than the actual people that are willing to serve. So you get signing bonuses, you got all kinds of stuff to try to get people in the door. But again, the training, sometimes depending again on the jurisdiction, is not necessarily adequate enough to prepare people for real life situations that come into play when it comes to mental health, when it comes to all kinds of stuff that are nuanced, and that you can't just, and again, whatever the training is telling you to do, you can't just pull a gun and shoot after someone who's fleeing, for example, and these kind of things. There's supposed to be other mechanisms. But yeah, there are exceptions apparently within this framework. Again, on the federal level, chokeholds and other things are still permitted. So
shooting.
Yes.
And shooting.
Moving.
And shooting. I know we got to take a quick pause, but shootings is huge. There's no data to that's put out there, and the same level of demand that we put on smaller, like your local police departments to put out information about shootings, police involved shootings, the same level of demand that needs to come to the public very, very quickly. This is why NBC News is doing this whole investigation, because it's showing that public demands to release body camera video and use of force investigations reports that there is very little public demand that's present when it comes to these federal agencies. Because these are federal operations conducted by agents and task force with 4 federal law enforcement agencies, the FBI, ATF, DEA, and Marshals, the use of force remains largely a black box free from public scrutiny.
That's why we need journalists. That's why we need the fourth estate. We need other people to bring this to light, or Congress is not going to move. We've seen it.
That's all it comes down to.
Yeah, and
that's
like
what
I said,
it comes down to.
On the side of making sure we have adequate training for people. Again, raising the standard for how people are qualified to do what they're doing, putting in the mental health pieces into place when there are situations that can be de-escalated, and teaching those methods when it's possible. But yeah, I think this is a very eye-opening report. Shout out to NBC News and others. I was just reading on CBS News some of the same information. It is quite critical that we have these discussions and that we are putting pressure on our Congress as well as the executive branch to do something about it, or they're going to keep going and no one's going to have any accountability.
That's why we need Black attorney generals, and this is why we are seeing the struggle that Black attorney generals across this country are experiencing to bring some sense of justice back into the criminal justice system. We're going to talk about this struggle with our sister Suzette Speaks, and of course with you. Stay with us. It's The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
I'm Farajii Muhammad, live from LA. And this is The Culture. The Culture is a two-way conversation. You and me. We talk about the stories, politics, the good, the bad, and the downright ugly. So join our community every day at 3 p.m. Eastern and let your voice be heard. Hey, we're all in this together. So let's talk about it and see what kind of trouble we can get into. It's The Culture, weekdays at 3, only on the Black Star Network.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in Black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
All right, folks, welcome back to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Let's shift gears as I talk to my sister Suzette Speaks, host of the Suzette Speaks Show on YouTube, and also a licensed attorney in the state of Florida. Let's talk a little bit about the struggle of Black attorneys. There was a report that came out from the GRIO that's saying that, well, actually it came out from the Associated Press, and an exclusive conversation the Associated Press had with all of the Black attorney generals in the country, and there are only 7 Black attorney generals, Suzanne, in the whole country.
Yep.
7. Like, like we can count on our 2 hands. 7 Black attorney generals. First and foremost, Suzanne, and I know this might sound like a silly question, but I'm asking this for just simple clarity. The role of the Attorney General what is that role? Because
No,
I
that's a
want
good
us to
question.
start
Yeah,
from
we
there.
have to, yeah, people.
I want to start because I don't want people to be like, I know what an attorney general is. It's just not. There's a very specific role. Talk to us. What is the role? What is the attorney general's role?
Absolutely. We have to start with that foundation. Thank you, Farajii. So an attorney general is the state's attorney for that state. So what does that mean? Break it down. So they represent the state in legal matters. So oftentimes you'll see the attorney general protecting state agencies, like when a state agency is sued, they represent the agency, or if an employee of the state is sued for, bad acting, the attorney general represents them. You'll oftentimes find the attorney general as the sounding board for the executive branch of that state, meaning the governor. So when the governor wants to take action and they want to know if it's within the constitution of that state and if it complies with the United States Constitution, they check with the attorney general and they do kind of like a full review of that action. You'll find now, kind of in modern times, as the position has evolved, you'll see attorney generals also bringing lawsuits on behalf of, consumer protection rights when it comes to companies who are doing business within their state and maybe doing something that is infringing upon or hurting the rights of people of that state. You will also find the attorney generals now are using their office to sue the federal government, as we've seen, as we just spoke about, with the frivolous lawsuits that were filed against the outcome of the election in 2020 and others that actually do have grounds. You'll see that they'll be fighting maybe federal action, for example, in the state of Florida, when there comes to, possibly federal guidelines when it comes to the Everglades and where people can drill. For example, the attorney general might file a lawsuit on behalf of the state of Florida saying, nope, you're overstepping your bounds. We need the Supreme Court to rule on this. So we'll see that the attorney general is a strategist. They are, again, on behalf of those who work for the state in terms of protecting what they do and making sure that it stays within the state law as well as the constitutional laws.
All right, so let's do our due diligence. And Sean Ryan said, I don't know what the role is. So I'm glad that you pointed that we had that part of the conversation because, again, I know how certain words and just we assume that everyone knows what a role is, but they don't. But
If
there
I
are
may,
seven.
if I
Go
may
ahead, please.
also add, I've seen attorney generals now. They've also started helping local law enforcement, like other local attorneys, state's attorneys, with big cases. So sometimes you'll see the statewide, again, these are statewide officials, right, that are running for the entire state. They will go and help, especially when it comes to very critical cases, the local prosecutorial or state attorney staff on those cases. I wanted to add that.
Absolutely. All right, so let's talk about these attorney generals because they're struggling right now. These are struggling. Now, let me ask you this question before we kind of go further deeper into this. When we're saying an attorney general and they are the legal representative of the state, is that more of the prosecutor or is that more of like a defendant, a public defender?
No, it's different in a
Okay.
sense because they are more like the lawyer for the state. So
Okay.
again, their job is to look at what state agencies are doing, what state employees are doing, and if there are any legal issues that arise from an agency putting in a new policy, for example, or an agency, spending money a certain type of way, or for example, even maybe hurting someone in the line of what they're doing. For example, if we have a version of like the ATF in Florida, Fish and Wildlife, if something goes into some sort of legal dispute where someone is suing Fish and Wildlife because they didn't get their license for whatever permit, or they're suing the Department of Agriculture for whatever reason, their office represents the state's interest. They are the state's lawyers. So oftentimes, like we'll see it with the governor's lawyer, like trying to promote and protect an action by the governor, etc. If the governor is sued, if the state is sued. So it's not like they are on the criminal side necessarily, depending on the state, for prosecution, but they are defending state agencies and institutions. That's their original role. Again, different states have different provisions that allow them to do different functions, but generally speaking, they work on behalf of the state.
Absolutely. We're going to let me name these attorney generals, and then we're going to take another quick pause. We're talking about Anthony Brown, who serves as the attorney general for the state of Maryland. Kwame Raoul, the attorney general for the state of Illinois. Letitia James, the attorney general for New York. Keith Ellison, the attorney general for Minnesota. Daniel Cameron, he just lost the election, but he's still the attorney general for the state of Kentucky. Andrea Campbell, who serves as the attorney general for the state of Massachusetts. And Aaron Ford, who serves as the attorney general for the state of Nevada. Out of the 7 Black attorney generals, 6 are Democrats. The only one that's not is Mr. Daniel Cameron. But 6 are Democrats. So we got to take a quick pause there. But when you're talking about the intersection of race, politics, and law, which they are confronted with each and every day as Black attorney generals, whether it's coming from within their office, within their industry, the work that they do, or because of the stuff that's going on outside of their office, they are struggling to try to figure out how do you bring justice from a system that has historically denied justice to a people. And so this is a very, very real piece. And this is a very interesting piece. Of course, we're not going to be able to cover all the dynamics and factors of this Associated Press report. But I think it speaks volumes about, 1, the need for more Black attorney generals. 2, I think it also speaks to the fact that they are at least talking about this stuff and thinking about this stuff. And I don't know, for all of my politicos in the chat, y'all would say, look, we need to make sure that when we go to the polls and then when that election comes up, when that appointment comes up, that we advocate for certain voices to serve as the attorney generals, because we're seeing it in case after case and state after state, they are the ones that are doing the state's legal bidding. And in cases of police misconduct or any other infraction or injustice, they are instrumental in those cases. Folks, we got to take a quick pause. Stay with us. It's The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay Black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
I'm Farajii Muhammad, live from LA. And this is The Culture. The Culture is a two-way conversation. You and me. We talk about the stories, politics, the good, the bad, and the downright ugly. So join our community every day at 3 p.m. Eastern and let your voice be heard. Hey, we're all in this together. So let's talk about it and see what kind of trouble we can get into. It's The Culture, weekdays at 3, only on the Black Star Network.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
All right, folks, welcome back to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. We have been talking about the struggle of America's Black attorney generals as the intersection of race politics and the law is constantly colliding as these Black attorney generals from just 7 states, there are only 7 Black attorney generals, 6 are Democrats, 1 is Republican, and we find ourselves in a situation where it seems like it's going to be an uphill battle in terms of reform of the criminal justice system. Bringing back my sister Suzette Speaks. All of these attorney generals, Suzette, spoke on the big elephant in the room, race. They see it happening each and every day. What is it that we need these attorney generals? But let me rephrase this question. When it comes to the race factor, in prosecuting the law and just in its relationship to the law, how can these Black attorney generals help to push the conversation and to push progress forward? Because if they're working on the behalf of the state, then I would think that level of advocacy can be challenging, and in some cases it could be a conflict of interest. Am I wrong in thinking that?
No, it's not wrong, Farajii. It's just different levels of what their responsibility are. Attorneys general are different from state attorneys or prosecutors. So attorney general is like the equivalent of the state having its own lawyer and giving legal advice to the state. Let me do this. The equivalent is the U.S. attorney general, right? We've had 2 African Americans there, Eric Holder, first Black man to serve as United States Attorney General. And again, that office serves as an advisory, a legal advisory position, like an attorney, again, on behalf of the people to the president, to the administration, to the U.S. government, right? So it's different from a state attorney who is a prosecutorial individual, right, function, as opposed to protecting the state and serving as an advisor to state action by the executive branch of that state, or in the case of the U.S. Attorney General, the actions of the president, right? They advise the president and offer their legal opinions on behalf of whatever that government requests. It'd be the U.S. government or the state. Each individual state has an attorney general. So in this regard, I do think when it comes to their positions, there is some latitude, and that's why you pointed it out. I know y'all tired of it, but elections matter, right? We've had several Black attorney general candidates. I know we just had one in Louisiana that wasn't able to put it out. We've had one, I think it was 2018 election here, Sean Shaw in Florida. We've seen these statewide positions. Why does it matter that we have Black folks in these offices? Well, as we've seen, again, each state writes their laws a little bit differently. But for example, what we're seeing from someone like a Keith Ellison in Minnesota or a Letitia James in New York, what they can do when they are advocating on behalf of the state, and how it can affect race. For example, there are rules in Minnesota, and I don't know practice in Minnesota specifically, but as I said, sometimes they do get involved with state prosecutors, right, who are state attorneys who need help on bigger cases. So there may be rules in a specific state, what we call a jurisdiction, where the attorney general is the arbiter or the person with the final say on what happens if a police a personnel is involved in a shooting, or if something else happens where there's an investigation that must be held at the attorney general level. They make the call as to whether they pick up that case or fulfill that duty or not. In the case of Letitia James, as we've been seeing with her filing the lawsuit on behalf of the state against former President Trump, she's looking at it and again, from her thorough investigation, years-long investigation, as to how can she hold folks who are doing business in that specific case accountable. In New York, we see that kind of overlay of the consumer protection aspect that helps this particular position in our government do its job. So when it comes to how they can impact a race, I think that consumer protection angle is the kind of the first prong of how they can go about looking at how people do business. Is it being done fairly? Is there bias? Is there outcomes that are unintentionally, favoring one group or another? That's a huge responsibility. Again, those type of lawsuits have now in modern times come under the auspices of an attorney general. But again, when it comes to some of these high level criminal cases, they can often offer help and render help to the local state attorney, which is that local prosecutor, each county or each district or each parish, whatever it's called where you live, in helping them to also seek justice in whatever they're doing in their local cases that the prosecutor is supposed to handle. So they have a multitude of roles. Again, they are not prosecutor for the state. That's not their role. They are an advisor on behalf of the people to the executive branch of the state agencies, state employees. Any actor on behalf of the state is represented by the attorney general, including the governor.
So let me get it. There we go. So when we talked about, and I know we got to take another quick break, but when we talked about what happened with like Derek Chauvin, with the attorney general there, Keith Ellison out of Minnesota, and how he prosecuted that case against Derek Chauvin, that was a huge win, right? It was a big win. We're talking about the state of Minnesota versus Derek Chauvin as the individual, not as Derek Chauvin. And I'm just using this as an example.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Like that the state was on one side, Derek Chauvin was on the other side of that as an individual, not as a representative of the police department.
Yeah, I
so
think
that type of those type of cases. Yeah.
Pardon me. I think within the Minnesota law, and again, I'm not a practicing attorney for Minnesota, there is a provision that allowed Mr. Ellison to take that case. Do you understand?
Oh, okay.
So there was maybe, I don't know if there was a conflict of interest. I don't have the facts in front of me, but something allowed him to step in, and therefore, I know that he chose to not step over, but like supersede the position of that prosecutor for whatever reason. But that's not normally their role. But that can happen in a case like that.
And this is why you've been saying it as we've been talking about this. This is why it's important, because some of these cases, they're like game-changing cases. These are cases that start off one way, the attorney general steps in, and then from that case, a new law can come forth, right, as a result of that case, right? That's how big. That's how impactful of a role an attorney general can make in a certain case. And am I looking at that correctly?
Absolutely. And again, I'm looking at, for example, my experiences in the Florida attorney general and her current position and what she can do. It varies from state to state. I'm thinking about Kamala Harris and what she did as attorney general. There are differences in the laws of what attorney generals there in California are allowed to do. And so what she was able to do as kind of overseeing some of the, what you're talking about, prosecutorial discretion and what crimes were being were pursued more. Those are, depending on state to state, some of the functions that do make a big difference. I do agree with you. I just know that in the general sense, they're more looking at being the state's lawyer, not a prosecutor. But in certain states, perhaps because of the examples that you're bringing up, they do have some function. And it's important to have the right people when they can make those calls in those positions so that we get, fairness and justice when we are looking at, the political stances of the folks that are holding these offices. So it does make a huge difference as to what happens in those, cases that go up to the attorney general. and where they have that, again, that discretion to be able to say, I'm stepping in here, or we have to, make a move there. It is important because everybody won't make the same decisions, unfortunately, depending on who's in that office. So yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right.
And it's the same thing with Daniel Cameron in Kentucky. The impact that he made in the case of our sister who was shot and killed in her home. You know what I'm saying? Like
Not
this
pressing charges, I think, because it involved a law enforcement officer there. He didn't have to. He had the discretion to make a call as to whether or not the case would go forward or not, and he chose not to. So yes, absolutely, they make a huge difference when it comes to the criminal justice aspects of their position.
And the voters, and as we take a final question before we take our break, the voters vote the attorney general in. Is that the power that voters have?
That's why we have to pay attention.
So there's no state that appoints attorney generals.
Not just governor. When we look down the ballot, the attorney general is also there, right? Oftentimes there's a finance person. We call it here in Florida, the chief financial officer. Some people call it the state comptroller. They're also a fixture oftentimes in the executive branch of what everybody across the state, gets to vote on, right? Usually every 4 years. So that presidential election year, Florida, we do it every 2 years in between the presidential year, but we have the governor, we have the chief financial officer, we have the attorney general, and the other person is the agricultural department, Florida Department of Agricultural commissioner. So it's different in every state, but yes, that attorney general is typically elected by the people of the state.
And I know this is such a big conversation, Suzette, but I at least wanted us to start the conversation, especially with you, because as we're going into the election season, I wanted to highlight some of these roles that we don't often talk about unless there's a major case or major situation. But we don't talk about the attorney general. I don't think that people truly understand that the attorney general can be the arbiter of law and order in a lot of ways, right? Or they can be the big decision maker whether justice is rendered in a particular case that can open it up for other victims to stand up or for people to go to jail. So, when we're talking about all of these different roles, as much as we talk about presidents and senators and House and representatives and things, like it is those positions, those statewide positions like attorney general, don't look over them on the ballot, folks. Don't just say, your attorney general can make a world of difference. It can make your life a lot easier if you know that your attorney general has a damn heart and has a mindset and their views of the law is consistent with your personal view of the law. Of course, we're not going to agree on everything, but you want to make sure you have the right person in position because you for the state to have certain people in place, that's where we need to have. The voters need to be assured that justice is going to be rendered even when it comes from the state. And I think that for a long time, Suzette, our people, we have often relied on like state constitution just as much as we relied on the federal constitution to protect us. When things go wrong, we always kind of revert back to the law to see, okay, but you're against the law when you violated me. And I think that's the important part about this whole thing. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, Maddie's going to kill us because we're supposed to take a break. But I just want to add, yes, you're 100% right. Be it both the attorney general, right, the attorneys for each and every state, as well as our state attorneys on the criminal justice side. The Black ones, we have seen made a huge difference here, even in Florida. They have been under attack. We see what happened to what's your sister's name in Baltimore, the state attorney there,
Marilyn Mosby.
Marilyn Mosby. When we look at what happened in Florida to Monique Worrell, who was removed by Governor DeSantis. When we look at those, they go hand in hand, up and down the ballot. So both attorney generals as well can correct the historic inequality in our legal justice system. So having someone there with that type of eye towards, progress is what we need. So both the attorneys generals as well as Black state attorneys, we need to be looking out at where they stand on the issues so that we are electing people who have a kind of like-minded stance on the pursuit of justice. We got to take a break.
Absolutely. We got to take a break. Stay with us, folks. On the other side, let's switch gears. Let's talk about this case of our young brother down in Texas who was suspended from school after he just got back to school from a long-term suspension. Come on. Come on. We'll talk a little bit about this case and what happens next. Stay with us. It's The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
I'm Farajii Muhammad, live from LA. And this is The Culture. The Culture is a two-way conversation. You and me. We talk about the stories, politics, the good, the bad, and the downright ugly. So join our community every day at 3 p.m. Eastern and let your voice be heard. Hey, we're all in this together. So let's talk about it and see what kind of trouble we can get into. It's The Culture. Weekdays at 3, only on the Black Star Network.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com. Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
All right, y'all. Welcome back to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. Let's talk about this case. Let me bring my sister Suzette back into it. And Suzette.
Here we go again.
Yeah. Yeah.
2 months later. Here we go again.
All right, Lise, can we pull up the picture of Daryl George? 18-year-old Daryl George. I already remember this brother, right? Lots of fresh to death.
Absolutely. Pulled back, pinned up.
Pulled back, pinned up, the whole nine. So Daryl George went to a school in the Houston area named Barbers, and I think this is so interesting. It's so ironic that the name of his school is called Barbers Hill, and he's having a hair issue. Barbers Hill High School in Mont Bellevue, Texas. He went back to school after already being suspended, and the suspension had to be served outside of school. So once he completed that suspension, he came back to school and was suspended yesterday again for refusing to change his hairstyle. Daryl George, he was suspended for 13 days, Suzette, because his hair is quote unquote out of compliance when it's let down, according to a disciplinary notice issued by Barbers Hill High School in Mont Belvieu, Texas. It was his first day back at the school after spending a month at an off-site disciplinary program. Now, Daryl George has spent 80% of his junior year in suspension because of his hair. 80% of this year has been outside of the classroom. He was first pulled from the classroom back in August after school officials say his locks fell below his eyebrows and earlobes and violated the district dress code. His mom, Miss Dorisha George, said that because of the Crown Act, when it became law in Texas in September, it is intended to prohibit race-based hair discrimination. Facts. The school says the Crown Act does not address hair length.
Wow.
So Ms. George says, quote, "We are just trying to take it day by day. That's all we can do. We do not see the light at the end of the tunnel, but we are not giving up." Here, we ain't got a lot of time to go into this. We ain't got a lot of time.
I'm tired, Farajii. I'm tired.
You said I'm tired, Farajii. Look, if I remember my grandmother used to tell me something. And you might have gotten the same advice from your grandmother as well, Suzette. If people don't want you in a certain space, don't be in that space, man.
Mm-hmm. Well,
I don't know what to make of this. This is absolute insanity, and it's not enough to just be like, "Damn, that's messed up," or "Somebody should do something." This is absolute insanity that a school and a district and a superintendent can go this far to penalize this black boy for something as trivial as it is. I mean, he was suspended in school. He was told he was told he needed to take another suspension outside of school. He did that for 30 days. Then he come back and he's suspended again. All the while, the whole country knows about the story of Daryl George.
Yeah.
What's your take, Suzette?
Well, again, we were introduced to this case a few months back, August, September, where we heard about this young man who was given internal suspension for his hair being locked and being, as the school describes it, longer than allowed under their rules there at the school. As you stated, he spent the majority of his, requisite time that it should have been in the classroom in internal suspension and has been suspended. Here we go yet again. I was reading some comments by State Rep Ron Reynolds, who is the chair of the Democratic Black Caucus there in Texas, and he has advised that he has filed an amendment to the Crown Act. Now, I was looking, I'm like, Texas has a Crown Act, and again, these are acts that we're seeing across the country that help to protect Black folks from discrimination just like this, where because of their hairstyle, they are being told that they are not allowed to work, serve, be promoted in other ways. And now we're seeing here be allowed to go to school. Again, thank you for the public education that we have here in the United States as a right. But here we are seeing a young man whose education is being impeded by a rule that is many would call arbitrary about hair length, again, as it applies to different people with different hair textures, different ethnicities, and different backgrounds. The hair length is, again, arbitrary, depending on how your hair grows from your head. I was looking up the Texas Crown Act, and the person who wrote it, State Representative Retta Bowers, made a comment about this very case. Now that, again, George's family has now filed a lawsuit against the Texas Education Agency and a federal civil rights lawsuit against the state's governor and attorney general, as we just spoke about, in order to say, again, they are actually in violation of the new Texas law, which just passed in October. So they have a Crown Act now in Texas that just recently passed, and they're now arguing. The attorneys for the family are saying that the school is now in violation of the Crown Act. So going back to the head of the Black Caucus, interestingly enough, the Crown Act that has been written in Texas doesn't address length of hair, which has been the linchpin that the state, that the local school has been using to say that, again, his hair is long, even though it's pinned up above his ear, pull back, and you're not seeing the full length of hair. The hair is in itself, as presented when walking in the school, short, but they're saying that he's in violation of this. So again, this young man is being singled out. At least that's how he has expressed his feelings towards why is it my hair is such a big deal in terms of why I can't wear it.
I don't know.
And
Hey, Suzette, let's do this. Before you finish, I want to get a quick 30 seconds in. Let's get a quick final pause in.
Sure.
And then I want to get you to finish up your statement. But to answer your question, I don't know why the hell they so worried about you, man. I'm so sorry this little brother got to go through this. But the ones that blazing the path are the ones that catch the most fire. Just let us remember that. Let's take a quick pause. Stay with us. It's the culture here on the Black Star Network.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
All right, folks, welcome back to the culture. We've been talking about Texas high school student Daryl George, who was suspended for 13 days yesterday because his hair is out of compliance when let down, according to a new disciplinary notice issued by his Texas high school in Mount Bellevue, Texas. This is the same young black man who was serving a suspension out of school for the same quote unquote violation. This is the same young black man who had to serve a previous in-school suspension because of the same violation. And as a result of all these suspensions and the time that he's been away from school, Daryl George has already spent more than 80% of his junior year outside of his regular classroom. Let me bring my sister Suzette Speaks back into this. Suzette, but I want you to finish your thought as before we went to break.
I was just looking up the Texas Crown Act, and again, it stands for creating a respectful and open world for natural hair, and specifically outlaws discrimination on the basis of hair texture or protective hairstyles associated with race. So as I was saying before we went to break, Mr. Daryl George has said he's being singled out because there are other boys, according to him, at his school with longer hairstyles than his, right? He was denied an exemption that the family requested because of the hairstyle's cultural and religious. I was like, could he have gotten a religious exemption? He's filed for one and he's been denied for that. So in that statement, that tells me perhaps there are other folks, maybe perhaps of different ethnicities, who also are sporting longer hair, according to him, and are not being given the same a measure of punishment for carrying that hairstyle. So I would love to see, again, with that Crown Act, Representative Ron Reynolds of the Black Caucus, the Democratic chair of the Black Caucus, says he specifically wants to add during the next session in Texas a provision addressing length to stop their pretextual argument that it is not out of compliance with the Crown Act. It's saying the Crown Act is not saying length. So hopefully we can get that corrected. But in Ron Reynolds, State Representative Ron Reynolds' words, quote, they are acting in bad faith to continue discriminating against African-American students. And I think many would agree with that.
Absolutely. Ricky Robbie, you said there are dress code standards. Obviously, this kid has some behavioral issues. They didn't suspend him over his hair. You all failed to mention whether or not it's a public school or not. Okay, it's a public school. It is a public school. But they did suspend him over his hair.
It wouldn't have been a big issue if it wasn't because of his hair.
If it wasn't for his hair, what the hell are you talking about, Ricky? Dress code standards. Obviously, this kid has some behavioral issues. He has some behavioral issues. Everything. If you've been following this story, we have been following this story on the culture. You've been following this story. This has happened since the beginning of the school year.
Mm-hmm. But isn't that an interesting mindset, Farajii? Isn't that an interesting mindset? Sorry to interrupt. That
no, go ahead.
There has been historically an equation of certain hairstyles carrying a significance in terms of how other people interpret their cleanliness, their association with certain behavior. I'm thinking from my cultural reference, Rastafarianism, and how it was seen as being something that was in opposition of the crown at the time, and how they were branded as this kind of like outlier, renegade, belligerent sect of people, literally murdered. But it's interesting, again, that's why we have to see the outcome through here, because the association with certain hairstyles that, again, people will continue to see in the workplace will continue to rock, because that is our form of self-expression, and therefore it should be, once well-groomed and kept, should be adequately protected, just like anyone else's hair. And it shouldn't be deemed some other type of statement about the child's behavior, etc. So I do think that comment highlights sometimes that implicit bias, that an assumption that is made when it connects a certain look and a certain hairstyle to certain behavior. Just my thoughts.
No, that's a great point. Implicit bias is all up in this case. And at this point, I know we have to shut it down, but my thinking is, and ABX Girl, and good to see you, ABX Girl, you said, I am sorry, but that cannot be the only school in town. Would you recommend, if you were on their legal team, hey, we know you want to keep up the good fight. Let's see if we can get your son in another school. Would that be a recommendation you would give to this client?
Depends on what they want the outcome to be. I mean, for those of us who thought the fight was over when it comes to all kinds of, civil rights infractions, this being one, people would say, oh, this is not as important as others, but there was someone who sacrificed to make sure, as you said, that our country lived up to its wonderful laws to protect everyone, to allow everyone's self-expression, allow everyone's pursuit of happiness, allow equal treatment under the law. Someone had to hold them to account. So I would just say it depends. And it seems as if the goal here is for equality across the board when it comes to how people are allowed to wear their hair. And again, if that's their goal, I think, he will, again, probably graduate. And then you come to a point where it becomes, does he have standing, right? Is this still impacting him? Does he have the grounds to say this rule impacts him as such? I think in the time he has left, possibly, get the tutoring going and the SAT prep at home going, so he doesn't miss out on actual, the education piece of it. But if their goal is to try to make a change in the policy, then you have to fight the fight.
Absolutely, like Corinna said. The same exact way these racists are relentless in their discrimination is how we must be when it comes to our voting, activism, and pressure to create change. I could not agree with you more, Corinna. And Corinna also brought up the concern that it might affect his college application. But I will say that
it might get him in. I'm just saying. I know we gotta go. Maddie's about to have
you took the words right out of my mouth. I was like, what? It might actually get them into school. Absolutely.
It's a valiant fight. So yeah, we'll see.
And look, let's ask the big question. Compensation, money coming out of this situation, yes or no?
Quite possibly. I don't practice in Texas, but I'm looking at what the family is arguing. I mean, there possibly could be. I don't know if the ACLU is involved and others, but they are suing the attorney general, governor, and their version of the Board of Education. So we will see.
There it
There
is.
will be
We will see.
conversation.
Absolutely. All right, Suzette, I appreciate you. Suzette was giving all the expertise today, y'all. I had her brain going.
Listen, a lot of information in a little bit of time. We got Art Basel this week in Miami. If you're out and about, I'll see you at some of these events here in Art Basel. It's an exciting time.
Oh, very exciting. Very exciting. All right. My sister Suzette Speaks. Follow her on social media at Suzette Speaks. Make sure you watch her show. Make sure you subscribe to her show on YouTube. She's doing a phenomenal job keeping the work out there, keeping the conversation going. And she does a phenomenal job here on The Culture, and one of our great legal experts here on The Culture. So thank you so much, Suzette, for being so good for The Culture.
Thanks, Farajii. See y'all next week.
See you next week. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us. I thank each and every one of you, my fantastic culture crew. Thank y'all so much for checking in and being a part of the conversation. Hey, look, if you haven't had a chance to check us out on our website, go to our website today, download the app, blackstarnetwork.com, download the app on all your devices, follow us on social media, and of course, we would love to get your donation, your support, your investment in Black-owned media in the digital space. So go to our website today and support us here at Black Star Network. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us. I thank my fantastic production team for making today's show possible, but I cannot thank you enough for tuning in, spending your time with us. 6 p.m. Eastern Time. We got Rolling Martin Unfiltered coming at you right here on the streaming service. Make sure y'all stick around for that. But as always, never be afraid to challenge what's wrong. Stand for what's right while being yourself in the process. God willing, we'll be back tomorrow for another exciting edition of The Culture right here, only here, exclusively here on the Black Star Network. Have a great afternoon and evening. God willing, we'll talk tomorrow. Peace.